us, and you have probably seen neighbors take down just about every tree on their lot or take out every single bitter brush, and it's not exactly what you need or have to do to protect your home. So we wanted to have a program that talks about ecologically sensitive and ecologically aware Firewise, and all of us could do more to be more Firewise. So we have two speakers tonight. Kirsten from the Okanogan Conservation District has become, over the last few years, a Firewise expert and has a lot of really great helpful materials for us. And then Bevis, who is with the DNR Small Landowner something program. Ken, they're both the local folks in the county. Ken is going to share his story of how his house almost burned down. So he certainly has a very local take on this issue, but also has a lot of good knowledge on what we can do here in the Valley.
So many of you know me. For those of you who don't, I'm Kirsten Cook. I work for the Okanogan Conservation District. If you don't know what the Conservation District does, we are a fabulous resource for all of us who live in Okanogan County. We're a special district of state government, not unlike a school district. And we have a local board that keeps our feet grounded and us focused on getting conservation done on the ground. So if you have resource concerns, you call us and we'll steer you in the right direction and provide the assistance we can. So Ken and I are going to tag team tonight. I've just come from 2 straight days of Washington Fire Adapted Communities Conference, so I might be a little punchy, but I'll do my best. And Ken's going to talk about his experience, and then I'm going to go through some Firewise principles. Some of you will be familiar with these. And just a warning, you will see some things burning and some embers and things like that for folks who've experienced it. That's your trigger warning. And some of you who've had home assessments may see your home in here, so that's another warning. So, and then after I talk some Firewise principles, Ken's going to talk again about the ways that you can work your defensible space. So there's a balance between Firewise and habitat, and then I'll just wrap things up with some more stuff you can do in this area.
That fast? Cool. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Nice to see all my friends here. And I've got 2 roles here tonight. So Mary got mostly right. I work for the Department of Natural Resources now in the Small Forest Landowner Assistance Group. So everybody's worked with John Morgan. John Morgan experience. Yeah. We help landowners write stewardship plans and do cost shares, and I cover the whole state. I'm the wildlife guy for our program. So I do a lot of workshops and all these sorts of things. And for years, I have been preaching the value of dead trees, snags, and some of you might have picked up on some of that. And last year, my wife Terry and I, Terry Piper and Terry, had this experience as part of Carlton that I know lots of people in this room have their experience. There's something about being in the valley, everybody's got a fire story, every single person, and it's, thrilling and also chilling to hear them. And you know how when you go back through that, whatever your version of it was, your heart kind of sinks, and you know people who lost their homes, or you almost lost your home, or something. So there's this really deep emotional response to it. And what the irony is, not irony, but I've found myself bearing witness to the experience of going through a fire. And so this is about the 8th time I've given this talk in different places, and I keep getting asked to come. I did it yesterday at that same workshop Kirsten was at, to essentially remind people that the whole fire thing is real. And in other parts of the state, it is sort of this esoteric thing. It's like a what if, but here it's not. Here we know what it's like. Okay, she's going to see if we got this. So I'm just going to go through a few pictures here and tell a story, and I'm going to kind of pretend like I'm not here, meaning as if I was telling this in another place. And so I like to start out with the ecological elements of fire, because there's 2 parts to it. And the first one, and by the way, I'm going to be schizophrenic tonight and talk out of both sides of my mouth, because you're going to hear parts of this that would essentially say, yeah, we got to get rid of that brush. We got to get rid of it. And the other side is like, oh wait, that's habitat. Yes, yes, both of those are yes. So let's start with the ecology of it, because the ecology of fire is like, oh yeah, it's good for the landscape. We live in a dry forest environment. And so that line, let's see, I guess there's no pointer, is there, Mary? No, that's right. So that line represents essentially where the dry forest, the dry half of the state is. Fire ecology over there on the right and over there on the left are two whole different deals. And the dry forest is essentially a fire-driven ecosystem, you know, and those of us who, everybody in this room who's a naturalist of whatever ilk you are, you start looking at the landscape and you start to see things with a longer view. You start to realize that fire is just part of the deal. Is it bad? Is it good? You know, what about the Smokey Bear character? Well, it's not necessarily bad. Can it be good? Yeah. Is it part of a sustainable system? Yes. All these buzzwords. Fire is just part of the deal in that east side of the state. Case in point, the Methow wildlife area up there by the headquarters. There was a couple of stands that burned 1 year before these pictures were taken. Check out the crowns on those pines. Really looks nice. This is right at the corner of the road that goes up towards Cougar Lake. And all those trees survived and got rid of a lot of the stuff on the ground. Looked pretty good. We have a lot of stands around here. That's right over by Pine Forest. And I like to do this. Look at the crowns of the overstory trees, how far apart they are. And all that stuff underneath, that whole middle layer underneath has come in since Smokey the Bear came into the picture. So that forest right there, under the influence of fire, is something else going on there. So these mixed forests are a real odd circumstance. But in these dry forests, I'm going to quote Kent Woodruff. Everybody knows our old friend Kent Woodruff. I like to tease him, he's a little study guy. He calls it the black paintbrush. Expect the black paintbrush to come. And when the black paintbrush comes, so you can control the outcome. So it's not an if there's going to be a fire, it's a when there's going to be a fire. You might be lucky that it's not in your tenure, but it's coming. So that's just to be aware. So the ecology of it, you know, oh, fire is good for the ecosystem and everything. It's like, yeah, that's fine, unless you live in the woods. Then it changes the whole rubric. It's like, so here's that schizophrenic nature of the discussion here. We like living in the woods. There's different ways you can do it. This guy's place up there on the Chilliwack, Carlton roared right through. Look at that. Asbestos siding, metal roof, gravel. His wood pile was a quarter mile off to the left, and the fire roared right over that thing. Do you want to live in a bomb shelter? Well, it worked in this case. So that's a different way to do it. So now let's tell our story. Terry and I, my beloved wife, met one of our little dreams, which was to live in the mountains in a cool house. It used to be Casey and Laura Root's house, up on a hill, Rising Eagle Road. I mean, with this beautiful shrub habitat. Migratory warblers, rufous-sided towhees, white-crowned sparrows, nesting blue grouse, our beautiful pine trees. I mean, a great spot. We looked down on the airport. You know, of course, the deer just love the bitter brush, and so we just were digging this shrub environment with this was my little forest. I call it my little forest, you know, forestry, our little forest. So a couple acres of pine trees. I had big plants. I'm gonna make some snags and thin and plant some more stuff. I had big plans, you know, we're gonna work this thing up. And so you look out across, you look across there, and I can't speak for Terry, but we're living in a combination of ignorance and naivety. And the whole reality of fire in this environment, it never honestly occurred to me how flammable bitter brush is. Gasoline on a stick, that's what the firefighters call it. We had 6-foot-high bitter brush with all this dead wood in the middle of it. And this stuff is, you know, it'll burn. So, the Carlton Complex, anybody remember that? July 14th, 2014, there were about, I think it's 5 lightning strikes on the mountain range, essentially between here and the Okanogan Valley. They roughly were from just above Peregrine Lake, kind of down, and there was 5 of them that turned into fires. And tell me if I get my facts, and you can correct me if I'm way off here. But essentially, there were 5 little fires that got started, and the Forest Service and the DNR responded to them. The crews went up, dry mopped them, you know, dug the line around them, and they sat there for 2 days. Not much happened for 2 days. We looked at one of them. It just kind of puttered along. On the 16th of July, the wind came up, and our firestorm started. That was the day that it went 30 miles in 6 hours and all that crazy ass stuff. And so the Carlton Complex exploded, and those of us who lived through this thing remember this as probably one of the more traumatic things that's ever happened in your whole life, because all of a sudden, the whole world turned upside down. I remember having thoughts of like, so this is how society collapses. You know, the phones are out, the power's out, the roads are closed. What are we going to do? I'm going to go ahead and go for it on the emotions of this one. Because it's just such a story to tell that I don't think in this group I need to try to hold back. So it was a whale of a deal. Anybody else have the experience of driving down the highway where there were these flames along the road and the fire guys are there and you're like, what am I doing driving through here? And so I had no conception of the flammability of the shrub step. So looking across the valley, so where our house is, I'm halfway between here and Winthrop, left side of the road, two good things. One, the smoke was not blowing in our face, so we didn't have to breathe smoke. So we could see what was going on. The good news was we could see what was going on. The bad news was we could see what was going on. Because that whole hill in front of us, at night it looked like that. For like 4 days, it was just creeping down the hill. So we were on level 2 evacuation. We had our boxes packed. We were all ready. Everything is like, okay, so this is standing at our house. Some people have been to our house. So we've got that little opening there, a little fire pit. Looking down valley, that's down towards Twist. This is on the 18th. This is going from right to left. Burning all across there over towards Balky Hill. Peregrine Lake burning up above Peregrine Lake. All the way off to the far side so we can see the upper end. July 18th, things settled down. Remember that? The fire had blown to Pateros. Everything was kind of starting to settle down. Power was, so anyway, things were like, okay, so we're like, man, oh, and there was 2,000 firefighters by now over there at the high school. They had that little city going. But August 1st, there was a flat tire on a trailer on Highway 20, right up kind of near Signal Hill Road, and the sparks from that tire started a brush fire that blew fast. There was about 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing. It was 100 degrees. It had been 100 degrees for a month, and that sucker just went. And I don't have an aerial picture. We got to go on a balloon ride a month before that as a wedding present, so that's where these aerials came from. But boom, it blew up there, and it burned really fast. There were 2,000 firefighters over there at the high school, but they couldn't get there. So the airport, there was 9 helicopters sitting down there at the airport, and that sucker blew across the hill. About 2 hours, it went about 2 miles. What actually stopped it over there at the far end of Hoot and Holler is the wind stopped. The wind died down and all those firefighters and all that stuff. So it burned really fast across that hill. Wait, let's go back for a second. So our house is straight in the middle of that picture, and that is about 3 hours after it started. These are pictures I got from John, the Okanogan 6 fire guy. So he emailed me some shots taken from Rising Eagle Hill of the people who were there, who had time to get ready. I teased him. I said, John, how come there's no pictures of the flames? He said, we were busy then. So anyway, that's from Tom's house. That's what it looked like coming up that hill. So that bitter brush and grass was in a wall of flame. One of the firefighters told me that the flames were 30 to 50 feet high when they hit the pine trees. It's with that wind behind it. It's like, if you stood there, you would have been dead. So up it comes. Well, it burned really fast across there. There's our house right there. And it went through so fast, 10 houses burned down. And these are ones that are gone. And so I'm going to show you a few images from in that. And it went so fast. Oh, there's a couple of sheds in there that boom. So our neighbors, they've lost their homes. It's not a trivial thing to lose your home. I'm starting to, we people know this from people. It's like, oh, don't worry, it's only stuff. Well, it's more than that. It's a big, big deal. So Kathy, a month before this fire, we sat on her front step, might have been 2 months, and said, you know, Kathy, you might want to clear some of this brush out of here. She goes, yeah, I've been thinking about that. Never quite got around to it. The part-timers on the little road just above us, that little cabin had tall grass underneath of a wooden deck. And the firefighters, when they scouted this road out, at the end of their road, they hung the dreaded red ribbon, which was don't go there. There was no place to turn around. That was an indefensible structure, and it's gone. That was over in Hoot and Holler. I don't even want to tell that sad story because some friends lost their home. All kinds of houses burned down. That was kind of neat. I don't think that's one of my nest logs, is what I don't know. So it burned all around our house. It blew across there in this fast-moving brush fire, and our house was still there. We had friends calling Terry on the phone going, I can't see it, I can't see it. Then the phone call a few minutes later, your house is still there. There was this amazing communication. But why is our house still there? And so, that's sort of the drama of the whole circumstance. Afterwards, this is like the next day, 2 days later, it's like, whoa, why were we a green spot? Well, there's 5 reasons, and that's the reason I give this talk. It's not because it's any sort of a thrill to tell the story, because it's sort of gut-wrenching. But we basically had defensible space. Kirsten Cook, our heroic conservation district gal, came and did the Firewise inspection about 6 weeks before this fire. She came and walked around with a clipboard and said, that's bad, you know what I mean? You're toast. You really shouldn't do that. I'm teasing. No. And so we had reasonable defensible space, not perfect. So part of this story is that it's not perfect. Look at all this green stuff on the end here, but it was wet. And we've been running the sprinklers for 2 weeks, basically, continuously. So everything was soaked down. So they had something to work with. So there's the front of the joint. You can see all the black out there. No, railroad ties were a bad idea, I'm finding out. But we got away with that. And the hoses, in the front, key point, a big turnaround. You know those big fire trucks? You ever see those big red fire trucks? You know why they're so big? You know what's in the middle of them? A water tank. The thing's got, 1,500 gallons of water? It's heavy, and it takes a long ways to turn around. Part of the reason they didn't go up that road where that cabin burned down, there was no turnarounds. So these guys know that. So something you need to do is make friends with people on your local fire department so they know what your place is like. So anyway, we had a wide turnaround and gravel in the front. These guys over here. Anybody here from Okanogan 6? Thank you. Were you there?
No.
You were somewhere else.
Yeah, we just started.
Thank you. Let's hear it for those guys. If they had not come to our house, it would have burned down. Our house would have burned down from the ember shower and all the various and sundry weak spots. And the ember shower was so intense in the brush fire that I don't think you could have prevented it. So they saved our house. Well, they were one part. So this is part of our story. The resources were available, and they came. You can't count on that. If you live out in the sticks, this is part of this whole litany, is you don't want to have to count on these characters showing up. And afterwards, oh my God, these people were from Oregon. I'm all chatty, so I'm chatting up the mop-up guys. They were from Utah, Oregon, Colorado, and Washington. Oh, and yeah, they were all over the place. So anyway, the resources were available, and they came. Air attacks are going to show this. How many people watch those big DC-10s? That is cool. The thing comes in and it comes out like a fighter jet. But the air attack was key. That's from last year, from the excitement last year. But the air attack held the Rising Eagle fire to the line that it was on. So they laid this big retardant line over there towards Moccasin Lake Ranch. Our house is right in that picture. And that's what kept it from going further north. And ironically, Twist Fire burned north of that last year. So I just think, hooray for air attack. When the jets fly over, and I sort of shake my fist at them and say, shut up. When the helicopters fly over, I cheer. Put it out! You go! What do heroes do? Anyway, so a couple of close calls. The Okanogan 6, Max, your friend Max, she dropped her eyes bandana in front of her house, and it was singed. It had fallen out of her pocket or something. The mat right in front of the door had a whole bunch of burn holes in it. Kirsten's going to show you another thing that was here. My boat sitting out in the driveway, the seat melted. There's burn marks there. That tank was full of gasoline and it did not explode. I still don't know why that didn't. The fire guys could tell me that. So there were all these weird things. That's what it looked like coming. Captain John took that picture as it was approaching our house. But out by the shop, here's this is mine. This is all my crap out here. Look at the wood pile, all the crap over there. And there was a box of wood right there where that pile of cinders is. That's probably 15 feet from that little alcove in the shop that had gasoline and newspaper and bee frames and all this really flammable stuff. And it's burned there. So the firefighters had left. And Ed Stockard, our friend from across the valley, is watching our house, and he sees that, see that bonfire right there? That box went up after the firefighters left. And it's sitting there burning, and these helicopter guys are going by trying to put it out. They missed it 5 times. And it was the DNR guys because they would do a slurry. And then this guy came along, bingo, bullseye. Mike Cannon, Chicago, Illinois. And I went down on the runway and I asked Ed which helicopter and found him. And Terry got to meet him at a restaurant and thank him for making a bullseye shot and gave him a bottle of Fireball whiskey as a thank you. So we had the helicopter guy. Then it came back the next morning and that night and found little hot spots and put those out. So afterwards, it killed all of our pine trees. So the irony is the guy that's been preaching snags for all these years, and now he owns a snag patch. And the woodpeckers like it. And so look what happened. Remember that picture earlier where those deer were standing? That's right there. Oh my God, it burns so incredibly hot. And so, well, you'll see now of course, it's green and growing back, but we'll get to that. And so that's just what happened, and our house is sitting there. Okay, the Biznet's house is okay. The cabins in the middle of that slope over there are gone. And it happened really, really, really fast. Burned up our dog pen. The power pole burned. This was astounding. And the only thing holding it up right there is the conduit. That metal conduit fell over. It took those power guys 3 days to replace that pole. Neighbor's garage, like the nails laying in a line. This truck got so hot that the aluminum engine block melted. Those puddles, that puddle, the front right, that's the engine block. That's how hot it was. If you'd been standing any place in that, you would have died. Like, you'd have died instantly. Had 6 beehives, 4 of them burned up. There's a slurry of wax and honey right there in the front. And the bees did not leave, the bees died. We walked around a couple days later, and you'll hear this like, oh, wildlife gets away. No, it doesn't. That's a rubber boa. We found at least 4 or 5 rubber boas that had burned up. And chipmunks. The dogs would find these chipmunks and then eat them, crispy critters. But they were on the surface, so lots of small animals died. We were really hopeful that tree, now doesn't that tree sitting out in the open like that, even with branches low, doesn't that look like one that you would expect to survive? It didn't, it died. It got too hot. So our house survived. And that's just, we still have emotional scars. Terry's a little more resilient, but I'm already attack crazy, so this made me crazier. But it's just a really traumatic thing. So part of bearing witness to this is to encourage people to prepare for what could happen. You know, it's sort of a disaster preparedness thing. And so there it is ahead of time, and that's just 2 years later. I mean, it's really crazy. We planted a bunch of stuff, but the grass came back like that. So we had a circumstance where the expected flame lengths in the bitter brush would have been 30 feet for 10 minutes, something like that. This is what the fire fuels guys have figured out. Now we have 3 to 4 foot flames lengths for 30 seconds. There's a big difference. So your fuel tanks can drive less. I made that up. I'm not a fuels guy. But so here's the lessons. Number 1, preparation. Reasonable preparation, reasonable defensible space. We could certainly have been better. The ground crews were available and they came. The helicopter was a total bonus. And then the following, like a little bit more mop-up, putting the sprinklers back, all that stuff. And then just divine providence, luck, whatever the other factor that the mat didn't catch on, that gas tank didn't go on. So all these things, so this is all about risk management, and you know, whatever your particular belief systems are, you might want to prepare too. So there you go. I wrote a song about it. You want to hear the song? Okay. I think I could sing it without the microphone. So it's essentially the same story. Yeah. It helps if you plug it in. Don't do it like that. That should help. I'm going to see if I can sing loud enough that you can hear me.
July 14, 2014 was a bright summer day in the high Cascades area. Been 100 degrees for a month or more, all trees and grass cracked, ready to burn. Then thunderheads mile high, electrons in their dance, hot lightning bolts roll from cloud to the earth. Before that thunder boom, tall trees were on fire, all the things they jumped from ground to ground. Then came the firestorm. It was a firestorm. Dug fir and pine went up in exploding mushroom clouds. All the people stood in fear and awe, staring at the sky. We did not know what we saw, didn't know what to think. It felt like the end of the world. Ooh, it was a firestorm. Never seen a thing like this. Never seen it before. Ooh, it was a firestorm. Oh, the sheriff came to our house. He said, you gotta go. There's only minutes left to save this one. She fired the sprinklers, grabbed the dogs, threw things into the truck, tore down the field and cloud of dust. This smoke was closing in. Ooh, it came to fires. Ooh, it came to fires. The volunteers blazed up the hill, blinded by that storm. The flames they rushed up through the brush, 30 feet high. They set their hose, they made a stand, poured water on the flames. Saw the neighbors out and kept the house from burning to the ground. Ooh, they fought the fires. Ooh, they fought the fires. And then a helicopter hovered in the sky, dropping 240 bullseye on the bonfire. They kept our place from blowing up. They kept our house alive. Ooh, our home survived. Ooh, it was a firestorm. Never seen a thing like this. Never seen it happen long. It was a firestorm. Well, then the storm surged past, burned but still alive. Thank our gods, it's amazing by the action of our eyes. We stumbled down the road, watched our valley disappear, sat on the rocks, stunned, and we cried. Oh, it was a firestorm. Never seen a thing like this. Never since the day I was born. Oh, it was a firestorm.
experience with the National Park Service. So I come from this with an ecology background, but also living it and having spent one crazy summer running around putting fire out. So what we're going to talk about is some of the stuff that Ken talked about and some of the things that all of us can do to be more prepared. Because we live in a fire environment. It's part of it. My land hasn't burned for 35 years. I'm due any minute now. So that's just the reality of it. There's a couple of big programs that I'm a part of, Fire Adapted Communities, which recognizes that we do live in a fire environment and we can adapt to it. We're smart, we're humans, we got the big brain, right? So we should be able to figure out ways that we can live in a fire ecosystem and reduce the losses that we have. Firewise Communities program, same thing, that we can adapt. We can make choices that will reduce our risk. It won't take the risk away completely. Especially with Carlton, we saw firestorms that you can't adequately prepare for, but you can do a lot. And most of the homes, for the example in the Chilliwack, which was our first Firewise community, many of those homes survived, the folks that had done the Firewise work, so it does work. So you guys have probably seen this before, the fire triangle. There's 3 pieces you need to have a fire. You take one of the legs of the triangle away and you put the fire out. Fuel is one that we talk about a lot, and most people think, well, fuel, okay, that's the vegetation, that's the bitter brush, that's the trees, that's that stuff around my house. We have to remember that our homes are fuel too. So it just, that's the fact of life. The fire doesn't care whether it's a tree or a house. It's fuel too. So the issue with losing homes in wildfires is often that the homes are more flammable than the vegetation around them. And this is coming out of a lot of recent research from the last less than 10 years, looking at fires in California and Colorado and other places, and trying to figure out what was the pathway to ignition. How did these homes ignite? And in this case, you can see that all the vegetation around that home is green. It wasn't the vegetation that burned first and then took the home. This home went down because of a burning cause. So there's really 3 ways that homes can ignite. You've got your radiant heat, which is like the campfire heat that you stand around and feels good. That's where the magic 30 comes from, 30 feet. So they did some experiments about 20 years ago looking at how far away does a wood wall need to be from a fire to ignite just from radiant heat. And that's where 30 feet comes from. That's the magic number. Direct flame contact. Obviously, if there's fuel going right up to your wood siding, that's an efficient method to ignite a home. But the number 1 reason, and that people don't necessarily realize right away, is that embers are actually what ignite most homes in wildfires. It doesn't have to be a crown fire of trees, it can be embers from other things. And I like to show this picture from the Sleepy Hollow fire. This was primarily bitter brush and sagebrush embers that took many of these houses down, and that's what an ember storm looks like. Some of us have experienced this, some of us have not. But it's like thousands of tiny matches, or not even that tiny, melting down in your house. And so you can picture walking around your home in your landscape throwing matches down. Where would you have some issues? So we're going to talk about these 3 zones of defensible space. So right around the home, 30 feet to 100 feet out from the home, and then this zone 3. And that's really where Ken's going to come back and talk some more about how you can have that ecologically aware Firewise. So defensible space, how many people have heard that term? How many people have heard it called survivable space? So I think what's really important for those of us who have chosen to live in a fire-adapted ecosystem, to defensible space is survivable space for the firefighters we are hoping can come protect our home. If you can't create survivable space for them, they're not going to go there, nor should they. I told that to my fire district. I don't expect you guys to come up here. I've done everything I can to make my house as Firewise as possible. I don't expect you to come up here because I have one way in, one way out, and no good turn. So think about your house surviving, but also think about how can someone survive there if they're there fighting the fire. Basically, it's the place where you have modified the vegetation. Your defensible space depends on what's around you. So if you're on a flat area surrounded by grass, the 30 feet, that's going to be fine. The steeper your slope and the heavier your fuels, the more defensible space you need. The more distance out from the home you need to modify your vegetation. If you live on a smaller lot, that's collaboration with your neighbors so that you all can be protected. But just be aware that the closer you are to a steep slope, the more at risk you are and the more work you need to do on that downhill slope. Fire likes to move more quickly uphill. So, I'm going to spend a bunch of time on the house, which isn't, hey, ecologically aware Firewise, we're going to talk about the vegetation, right? Well, actually, a lot of the bang for your buck is actually in your house. So we're going to talk about zone 1 first, and that's the house and about 30 feet from. And remember, if it's attached to the house, it's part of the house. Fences, decks, all that good stuff, it's all part of the house. So let's talk about roofs. So anybody here have a shake roof? Wood shake roof? Excellent. So your roof is your biggest surface area, right? It's going to catch the most embers in any kind of fire situation. So you want to make sure that you have a good roof. It can be asphalt shingle, it can be metal, it can be clay tile, though I don't see a lot of those out here. The thing you have to remember is the more complicated your roof is, the more opportunity there is for debris to build up. And you can see how this house in the bottom picture, if embers landed on that debris, it's right next to the wood siding and also right next to a vent. Okay, so you want to be real careful. How is your roof looking? Is it in good shape? Does it have any gaps? And especially you look at the tile picture, those gaps there became unplugged, and so that is now a pathway for embers to enter and get under the roofing and next to the flammable sheathing. So that's why I look at a lot of details when I do Firewise assessments. Here's some more examples. The top picture is, a venting area, a gap that has been built into that roofing system to allow air to flow in there. But if the air is full of embers, you can imagine what's going to happen. The bird nest underneath, a good little ember catcher right underneath a flammable piece of plywood fascia, basically. And then we have an older structure over here on the right-hand side. You can see some gaps where the metal roofing meets the wood there. There's some gaps in the wood. So any of those small gaps and cracks or areas you may have ember entry that can be an issue for a home. Siding is really important. Many people have wood siding. And if you have wood siding, then you very much need to work on your defensible space because that is going to be one of your biggest vulnerabilities. If you are building or you have the opportunity, you need to replace some siding, there are some very good options out there. So that's actually my house with the stucco. Stucco is a great option. And then you have the fiber cement siding, which frankly is looking more and more like wood these days. It kind of fakes me out even. So you really have some good choices. They're not really any more expensive. I mean, hand-done stucco, yeah, that's kind of crazy, but the fiber cement stuff is really a good option for folks. Decks are a particular area to pay attention to, and it's not typically the deck itself that ignites. It's something underneath the deck or on top of the deck that ignites first, holds the flame there, and allows the deck to ignite. So these are some examples of decks with vegetation growing underneath them that could lead fire up onto the wood. You've got debris building up. And then this one in the right-hand corner, they call this a re-entrant corner in the building sciences, and it's an area where you might see in the winter the snow swirls around and kind of piles up there. Same thing with embers, it'll do the same thing. And so having a wood pile there and having a corner like that is going to be more vulnerable. So that kind of space you want to have very little flammable material on it. This is an example of what happens when you have a wood deck and some pine needles and embers in the area. So you can see how it's a pathway to ignition. And so that's why maintenance is going to be very important for anything that you do. And if you're not here all the time or you have neighbors who aren't here all the time, that's going to be one of their areas that, it needs attention. And if you're not here to do it, then it's going to be a risk factor. Up in the left-hand corner is a lovely picture of Ken's deck. It has the composite wood Trex material. And as you notice, it has burn holes in it, but it did not ignite. So I recommend people, if they're doing any kind of remodeling or building and they want to know about what kind of materials they should use, California has extremely strict building codes for the wildland-urban interface. You will not find that information because we don't have those kind of building codes in Okanogan County. So you can go to California and you can check out. They have a whole database on building materials. You can look up whatever you're thinking about getting and find out if it's fire rated and see if it's fire resistant. Great resource. So the most recent research in the last couple years is really pointing to our vents as one of the primary ways that embers are getting into homes and causing home ignitions. It kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? So these vents are there to pull air through our homes so that we don't have mold problems and water problems, to ventilate our roofs. But if you haven't screened these vents, they will also allow embers to come in. And even if you screen them, you will still get some embers in. They will be smaller, and typically they will not have the oomph to ignite anything. But that depends what's inside your house next to those vents, right? So if that's your attic space, and you've got a whole bunch of, my husband's grandfather's, letters from Japan in 1930 that are all paper under that vent, and a bunch of embers fall on it, then we have a potential ignition problem. So it pays to look at what's going on with your home and the vents. It can be eave vents, it can be gable vents, it can be foundation vents. So take a walk around your house tomorrow and see what's going on with your vents, and see if you can even see if they're screened. And screen them with 1/8" metal mesh, if nothing else. You can also buy some very cool engineered vents for retrofits that have actually been engineered so that an ember would have to turn 90 degrees, turn 90 degrees, turn 90 degrees, and then it would hit a screen, right? So really lessening that option. And that's the benefit of California having very strict codes, is now they have manufacturers who are innovating and creating these types of things. So you have to do the research, because not most builders that I've run into aren't aware of this yet. They're learning that more. But you have to be the educated consumer. Fences act like wicks. So you can have a really nice Firewise tone, but if your wooden fence is attached to your house and it goes out into a grassy space or a shrubby space, that can act as a wick to bring fire to your home. So either find a way to detach that, create a break between the home and the fence, or look at using a metal option. And railroad ties. It can sometimes take a week. These will smolder for weeks, and they take a lot of water to put out. So this is a home that I assessed, and you can't quite see it, but the railroad ties basically lead right up to that piece of wood shingle siding, right? So again, we're looking, when I go out and do assessments, and we do assessments, we're looking for pathways for fire to enter your home. So it could be this, it could be vegetation, it could be different things. So, yes, right? I know, I'm the same way. I want my firewood fuzzy slipper distance, right? I do not want to put my boots on. I just want to get my firewood. And that is great in the winter. In the summertime, you want to have a firewood pile at least 30 feet from your house. Anybody who's talked to anybody from District 6 will tell you how much water it takes to put those out. A lot. Because you think about it, it's a giant wood pile. So, and especially having it under a carport like this, this lower picture, it wicks it into the roofing material and into the home. Propane tanks. By code, a small enough propane tank can be set right next to your home. But I don't recommend it, because that's what happens when they vent by design and there's fire around it, right? It's basically a giant flamethrower under your eaves. So again, 30 feet is that recommended distance to have those type of things away from your home. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the landscaping. That was all the home stuff. So this, again, we're talking really zone 1, right around the home. So obviously, this is something that requires effort and maintenance. But a home that is surrounded by all of this wonderful vegetation and habitat is a home that's primed to burn. So there are lots of things that we can do to still have some really nice habitat around us, but not have it so close to the home that it puts us at risk. I highly recommend that you have a non-flammable perimeter around your home. So this landscaping here on the left-hand side, it's beautiful. I love it. It's wonderful. It's just very, obviously, a really great landscape architect designed that. But it's got wood mulch, and it's right next to cedar siding. And if the power goes out, and the irrigation goes out with it, and it's 103 degrees, how long is it going to take that landscape to dry out? Not very long. And so then you You have embers come in and you have a significant amount of fuel right next to your home. So one thing I see a lot in doing home assessments is, a lot of us came from other places. I'm from New England originally, and then I lived in Seattle for 18 years and got used to that ecosystem. And I had to get used to this ecosystem a little bit, right? And so sometimes we bring our gardening practices, we bring other practices from other places, and we transplant them and don't necessarily realize that they're not appropriate for the landscape we currently live in. So just a caution there. You can have a non-flammable perimeter of concrete. You can have gravel. I like to say gravel is your friend. As little as a foot can make a difference. 5 feet is even better. So, maybe not everybody's favorite aesthetic idea, but it makes a difference. The more and more the research is showing that this non-flammable perimeter makes a huge difference. If you're using any kind of mulch, especially us gardeners, we like mulch, right? Keeps the weeds down, keeps the moisture in, it's really great. It's also really darn flammable. You don't get huge flame lengths from it, but it does hold fire long enough that it could potentially ignite something else. So I like to highlight these folks. They have a place up near Oroville, and they have mulch around these plants, but you notice how they surrounded it all with their native rock that was around their property. I think it looks really cool, and it's great. It's really fire-wise. They're still getting the benefits of mulch around their plants, but they're not putting themselves at risk from a smoldering ember that's sitting there, because as Ken said, the firefighters will be there for the flame front, and then they're going to leave because they're going to deal with the flame front and it's threatening other homes. And so if there's stuff left behind and no one's there to put it out, that's my concern with mulch and things like that. That should be fine, as long as it's covered with rock. So when you're thinking about your landscaping in that 0 to 30 feet and in that next section out, which is 30 to 100, you want to have small amounts of vegetation. You want it to have very little dead debris that builds up. If it builds up, you need to rake it out of there. And you want them to be healthy, right? A green plant is going to be less likely to burn in certain circumstances. Every plant will burn if it gets hot and dry enough, but there are some that are more resistant. This is kind of some of the characteristics you see, and the number one thing that I look at is it's not that resinous, oily, or waxy stuff. So bitterbrush is waxy and oily and resinous. Pine is, sage is, eucalyptus is. There's a few other common landscaping plants that have, rosemary, stuff like that we really like for the herb and the oil. Could be an issue if it's right next to your doorstep. So, arborvitae and juniper, are they firewise? No. Do you know what the firefighters call them? Little green gas cannons. Yeah, we were just at the Fire Adaptive Communities meeting, and we had this mission of, well, we know we'll be successful when Home Depot won't sell arborvitae anymore. So, if you have these plants, I would recommend that you try to remove them from that 0 to 30 zone. If you have them in that 0 to 5 foot zone, I very, very strongly recommend that you remove them. Because if you've ever peeked into them, you realize that the green is only on the outside, and inside there's a lot of dead stuff. Okay, so lawns can be an effective fire break. I don't know about you guys, but I do not have enough water to have a lawn. So if you have enough water to have a lawn, that's awesome. Maintain a lawn. They're green, you keep them wet, they can be a great fire break. If you're like me and you do not have that kind of water, you can look at some non-flammable landscape options. So gravel, again, is your friend. Rocks are your friend. If you have, at my house, I really like the green grass that I have right now and the wildflowers, right? They're really nice right now, but come, first week that it's really, really hot and dry, like right around July 4th, that puppy's getting mowed all the way down. And if it's dead and mowed and you mow it when plants are going dormant, they're not going to grow a whole lot more, and that's fine. Flames could come through there, but they'd be very small flame lengths. They're not going to put out a lot of radiant heat. They're not going to put out a lot of embers. So if that's your option, that's a good one. And again, if you have that non-flammable perimeter, then it can't move it right up to your house. So I believe my next slide comes from the Institute for Business and Home Safety. They have a research center in South Carolina where they actually build homes and then try to destroy them. It's kind of cool. It's a good way to learn what works and what doesn't. So they test for hurricanes, they test for rainstorms, they test for hail, and they test for wildfires. So I'm going to show you a video of a home that they built, and it has different features. It has some different roofing materials, some different siding materials. It's got some mulch and some plants, and you'll see what they do to it. You can see the different roofing material, and you'll notice there's some debris on that roof and in those gutters. And this is them loading in the material that's going to create some pretty spectacular embers. They also have fans in this building that will basically estimate a 20-mile-an-hour wind. You guys know, I mean, 20 miles an hour, that's like a breeze around here, you know? I mean, that's common. So there's the ember generator. They're just pelting this house with it. You can see it starting to catch in the mulch, and you see there's one of those re-entry corners there that's going to swirl around some stuff. Oh, look, there it goes, up in the gutters. All those pine needles in the gutters, those just caught. Yep, it's in the landscaping. Oh, there's that corner. Oh, there goes the vinyl gutter. The vinyl doesn't burn, but it does melt, right? It droops. So now that fascia behind that gutter is exposed. See it turning in the wind so they can expose it equally to the wind. All the debris that was caught up on that roof is ignited and it's holding it up against the siding or the roofing. You can see they left the window open. You can see it catching on there. There's that corner, right? Really just concentrating all the embers and all the materials there. You can see the vinyl siding now has sagged and it's going to expose the plywood underneath. On the other side is the fiber cement siding. See that that's not burning. And here's what happens when you leave your window open. Right into the home. I really recommend you go check out their website, IBHS. You'll see a lot of really interesting things, especially the vent tests where they examined how much those embers get into homes through the vents. There's some really good stuff there. Okay, so again, talking about zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Zone 1, you want to have the least amount of vegetation and have that nice non-flammable perimeter. Zone 2 is where you want your firewood, you want your propane tank, but you can see that there's some vegetation out there. It's broken up into clumps. There's not a whole ton of it, but there's still plenty. And then as you get out to zone 3, again, you've reduced some of the vegetation, but you've left quite a bit. They're both going to have the possibility of igniting from embers. So the difference between bark mulch and pine needle mulch. Pine needles will probably go up more quickly, but will smolder less time because it's a finer fuel. The bark will take a little bit longer to get going, but will probably smolder for a longer period of time. Okay. So no matter where you are in zone 1 or zone 2 or zone 3, you want to be looking at your ladder fuels, right? Ladder fuels are fuels that move things from the ground up into the trees. Firefighters can be effective at dealing with fire when it's on the ground with small flame lengths. Once it moves up into the trees and becomes a crown fire, there's really nothing they can do. They have to back off to a safe zone and wait till the next opportunity to fight it. So your goal around your landscape is to make sure that there aren't ladder fuels, or if there's a spot that you're leaving as habitat, that it is isolated enough that it can't bring ground fire to other places. Okay, so I'm going to turn over to Ken. He's going to talk about some of the landscape management and slops.
Talk about habitat management in the dry forest. And a lot of people wonder, they're like, well, okay, I'm really worried about fires and fuels and everything. And so we're going to do a forest health treatment, a fuels reduction treatment. But I also like wildlife. Who doesn't like wildlife? I want to ask it. Anybody here hate chipmunks besides my wife? Her dog hates them. But people like wildlife. And you know, wildlife responds to habitat. It's essentially you build it, they will come. And so here's some ideas. So I came up with this acronym for the habitat elements in dry forest that you can apply in your fuels treatment. SLOPs, snags, logs, legacy, openings, patches, piles, and shrubs. And we'll speak to that here momentarily. So this is by way of what I do. I left some business cards back there. We help people write stewardship plans and things. And so I am available as a essentially resource. So send me an email, give me a call, and we can come out, we can do a little site visit and kind of flip this around. But my information is back there as well. So we've all seen a lot of this, these Smokey the Bear driven forests with all the fuel, all of these dense stands way out of natural range of variability of the dry forest system. One element of ponderosa pines and Douglas firs is in these fire adapted systems. They crank out the seed. So if you quit killing their babies, there's an awful lot of trees out there. So we've seen a lot of this. And so now we mimic fire by way of mechanical treatments. Because, you know, fire would be the right way to do it, but they even do a prescribed burn in my neighborhood if I can help it. And even if we wanted to, it would be really expensive. So we're using mechanical treatments to mimic fire. Does it mimic fire? Well, sort of. There's some missing parts to it, the way that it goes through. There's no chemical changes in the soil, etc. So mechanically, yes, but not really. Well, this is what happens when you hire a contractor and you send them out there and you've got Ken and Miguel and Fred and Tom, and you say, space the trees out to 24 feet and prune them up this high. They go, you bet, baby. And I've had landowners go like, well, they sure cleaned it up. That's what they'll do. They'll clean it up. Well, it may be really fire safe, but it's pretty lousy habitat. And for those of us who are habitat aficionados, you know, a golf course is real nice to look at, but it's not really very good habitat. So how do you cut that into a piece where you could still acknowledge the value of some of this fuel as habitat, yet still deal with this? And so this is a great segue because, you know, you're 0 to 30 bomb-proof, baby. You know what? Gravel, we're getting concrete siding, by the way. Does anybody want some railroad ties? Because I already cut them in half for a stairway project. And I got them. You know, I'll make you a good deal. Anyway, so the zones, well, out there, once you get past 100 feet, now we're talking about slops. Now we're talking about fuels reductions while acknowledging some habitat things. And so here's our objective, is to reduce the risk of losing everything while still maintaining some habitat diversity. Can it be done? Well, of course it can. Exactly. So how do you do that? So here's see, these are the elements, because you start tearing something down into its pieces. So it'd be snags, I said there's logs, legacy, openings, patches, piles, and shrubs. And there's proportionality to how you do this. So what it really applies to is project design while you do your fuels reduction project. So we'll speak to these things momentarily. And I was going to go through saying, oh, animals that benefit from snags might be, you know, white-headed woodpeckers and pileated woodpeckers, and then the logs would be the rubber boa and the bull snake and the bat. But I decided, you know what, I'll just put them all onto one slide. We've got a lot of wildlife diversity, as we all know, in this wonderful place. And there's many species that will benefit from doing these things as best you can. So snags, I hope everybody in this room knows that a standing dead tree with a hole in it is an incredibly valuable habitat, right? Good, thank you. I don't need to, you know, raise the snag. Yes, but they're really cool. And when you see a tree like that one on the right that's got these cavities in it that's busted up, that's been standing there dead for several decades, many decades. They last a long time. So very valuable habitats. And if you have one, this is something worth protecting and trying to perpetuate, meaning don't cut it down because you think it's ugly or something, unless, of course, it's, what's that? See, Robert scared his and it fell over. It broke Charlotte's. It did really. So, okay, we've got a hazard. Unless it's a hazard. So, yeah, snags are important. Once it falls down, it has a lot of value for many, many things. How many of us have seen a fence lizard go underneath of a log? So a log, once it's on the ground, it has a lot of value too. Rubber boas really like them. Legacy, I say legacy because these big trees, like these big pine trees, let's say, I don't know, you get a pine tree around here that's 35 inches in diameter. Look at the rings on these things. They're dinky. This is a hard place to grow a tree. They can last a long time. And so these big structures will be the backbone features of dry forest. And so there's something worth maintaining. And luckily, in most of our thinning projects, they're looking at, like with the DNR projects, the cost share is 8 inches or less, which pretty much takes care of this. Openings, you think about the dry forest structure, a lot of times there's these gaps. So the Forest Service guidelines for dry forest restoration will refer to skips and gaps. And so we'll get to this would be a gap, an opening where you might have, no trees at all. And as you do your treatment, you might pick places where you cut them all, cut the little ones, maintain your natural opening. Here's a place, so a patch would be a skip. This would be a spot where your fuels weren't treated, or they were more lightly treated. And you would deliberately pick a spot where sight distance was broken, like right here. And a scale, so like deer like to have their fawns in those. A lot of sparrows and other birds will nest in low bushes like that. And you can strategically put a patch like that in a place so that it's not ladder fuel, or so that it breaks the sight distance across that kind of parked out area. And so you have to be conscious. This is one where you would go out there, and before the contractor came, you'd be like, okay, I want to make sure, and you can pick a spot and you'd flag it out. And like with this guy, he deliberately left that piece because the deer liked it. He really liked deer, but they would kind of hide it. So the patches are something that work. Here's one is another active thing, piles. So brush, a slash pile is logging, unconsolidated logging debris that's usually this giant mechanical pile. A brush pile is the little stuff that you and I, when we trim our bushes, we make a brush pile, we burn those. I like this expression. A habitat pile is deliberately consciously constructed to be left behind, and if you do it with a little bit of design, you put the big stuff on the bottom up to about 5 layers so that it provides interstitial space for the birds and the chipmunks and the rabbits and all these other things. Then you put the fine stuff on top, and you do it on purpose, and you put it over there away from the other trees so it's not a ladder fuel, and you do it at a rate of, put them 100 feet apart, something like that. And it's also a way to get rid of some of your material. So if you have a contractor, you tell them to do this, and they work. I mean, it's the quickest habitat improvement thing you can do is to build a pile. So you have that pile versus a brush pile. Shrubs are part of the patches, but your shrub species, the ones that bear fruit, serviceberry, choke cherry berry, help me out, elderberry, what are some really good ones around here? Hawthorn, keep going. Not snowberry, not as much, but snowberry.
Mock-orange.
What's that?
Mock-orange.
Mock-orange, there you go. These ones that bear fruit that everything eats, maintain those. And so if you're having a thinning project, you might actually flag a bush and go, okay, this one's not under a tree. Don't cut that one. So I'm referring to a lot of the work, or if you were doing it yourself and you had an elderberry, you might actually prune that one instead of cutting it down. So, yeah, so the shrub layer has tremendous value for an awful lot of species, and in our habitat management, it's sort of like the Rodney Dangerfield element. It's brush. It's just brush. No, it's really, really valuable. So it's incumbent upon us to know what the good stuff is. So here we are. Here's a schematic diagram of a slops unit. Instead of being a golf course, we've got our little piles, we've got the snags, we've got some logs, we've got some openings, we've got some patches, and obviously you kind of get the idea that scattered around are your legacy trees. So we deliberately designed a habitat, and oh, by the way, assuming that's more than 100 feet from the house. And there it is. So some numbers, so people go, okay, all right, I kind of get it. Give me some numbers. some of them snags, 4 to 8 per acre, half of them hard, half soft. Logs reflect that. By the way, you will never count them. This will be the sort of thing where if they're there, they're there. If they're not, but they might want to chip them up. So that's what happens when the chipper shows up, and those strong young men, and they're almost always guys, because women, well, some are some, but they're strong young people, and you say go, they're going to cut it down and chip it. I promise. And if you ain't watching, it's going to be fine. Legacy, your largest trees, your gnarliest trees, remember that one on your place that's like kind of crazy crooked? That's a good tree. Oh, he's got one. I like it. Openings, how big? From here to Jason, an acre, but make them so they're big enough that they can grow some. This one is something that you can actually work on, but the patch is 30 feet across. Dense enough you can't quite see through. They don't have to be a quarter acre. And linear shape, you can actually think about how you would break the site distance and put them away from your overstory trees that you may retain that you might even prune. So you might go along and prune the branches off to break the lateral through. So you got to think flame distance, and I mentioned piles, 50 feet apart, 2 per acre. Decide if it's a 5-acre unit, I'm going to have 10 piles. Excellent. Now, where are we going to put them? Right there, okay? Right there. And they're really fun. The great thing with piles is they're fun to build, and they're a great project for kids and friends and that sort of thing. Shrubs, I said something about shrubs. So there it is. So here's an example. This place was crazy thick, and the Conservation District in Kittitas, that's finished. Now think about flame length in that project right there. The closest house, this is more than 100 feet from the house, so that's the fuels reduction. This is Suzanne's project, Suzanne Wing. And so there's 2 nice snags right there, and she felt like the clump on the right was too thick, and they were going to come back, and I was like, okay. So that's just an idea of the kind of thing you might do. So let's see, in this picture, there's a snag, there's a log, that's sort of an opening. There's a patch, it's not much of a patch. There's sort of a pile. There's no shrubs, but oh well, 5 out of 6 ain't bad. And there's legacy. So that actually is a finished unit, and the contractor made that pile. It's not much of a pile, admittedly, but that's the idea, where you can have some habitat complexity consciously built into your outer zone. So, that one's, see the patch in the back corner there? I don't see many logs. Well, there's a little bit. And so I bet you remember that acronym. It's a good acronym. It slops. I even had some of my foresters come up and say, hey, I want to give somebody your slops. I said, no, it's your slops. There you go. So I have to pitch this, that we have this 50-50 cost share program through the Small Forest Group. John Morgan, who I mentioned, is our local contact. So you can reach me. If anybody's interested in that, I can set you up with how to find that. Kent has worked with these guys in Pine Forest, so Kent could be a contact for that. And there you go. And if you want, I could do the Woodpecker song real quick. Unless it's too late. I don't know what time is it.
It is 8:19.
Tell me. What's that? It's about 2 minutes long. I need you to change the slide when we get to it. This is just to encourage you to do this stuff. This one's not grand like the other ones. So, see, what woodpeckers are sort of jolly. So, right. I'm a woodpecker, the king of the trees. I got everything I do is I please. Hey, hey! I'm the king of the woods. I'm a crazy red hammer, I'm making cavities. Falls for you, falls for me. Hey, hey! I'm the king of the woods. I climb up the trees, having habitats. Listening for that insane cave. I find that hollow sound, I act my way out, and I slip in my stick.
Do the work. Do the work to reduce your risk, because we know it works. So this is a home that survived the Carlton complex. They had done a cost share with DNR. They had their propane tank and their firewood pile 30 feet from the house. Metal roof, fiber cement siding. They had a wood deck, but you can notice that it's mowed all the way around, really low. And you can see how it burned through. We had such nice rain that fall that everything started to grow back really quickly. But you can see where it burned under their trees and up their trees a little bit. But again, they had done the work. There's help out there to do the work. So you don't have to do it yourself. You can start either with myself or a DNR forester or a District 6 person. Have the risk assessment done. Have us come out, walk around with you. You can ask all the questions you want. We can help sort of point out some of those areas that might be the ones to pay attention to first and help you prioritize. There are grants available to help you do the work. So the DNR cost share program that Ken mentioned. The NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, has an EQIP program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, I think. They have too many acronyms, I can't remember them all. But they basically will provide you a cost share where you do about 50-50 usually, and they'll help you do some of that work. You've got to have a site visit. They've got to write you a prescription that you're going to agree to do, and you have to maintain it for 10 to 15 years. If you have a big enough parcel, you may need a forest management plan. You can also cost share on a forest management plan. If you have more than 20 acres, you should have one anyway. It's just a great resource to have to guide your land management. These are the numbers for DNR and NRCS. I would also recommend you go poke around on firewise.org and disastersafety.org. There's some very good resources there. If you are doing any kind of thinning project or working on your fuels management, I like to show this slide because this was an EQIP project, and there were two different sort of strategies for this one. So on one side, you can see they did not limb up the trees, right? So the branches still went down to the ground. On the other side of the little dirt road, they did limb up the trees. Notice the difference? The fire came from the side where the trees had been limbed up, so it wasn't like it blasted those through and then hit the road and dropped down. It came the other way. So even things as small as limbing up versus not limbing up can make a big difference. I highly recommend you get together with your neighbors and become a Firewise community. These are our first 3 that we had. We now, I think, are up to 6, actually. Pine Forest has just become one, and we've got a few more looking at that. The Wolf Creek neighborhood is looking at becoming a Firewise community. I like to say becoming a Firewise community requires 3 Ps: patience, persistence, and potlucks. In the Chillowas, we had 5 people at our first potluck, and then we had 10, and then we had 20, and by the time they got their recognition, we had 45 people, and our former emergency manager, who was really not all that into the Firewise program, he showed up and talked for 20 minutes about how awesome it was. It's a great way to get together with your neighbors, and especially if you're in one of those communities that has both full-time folks and part-time folks, because it's a good way to bring the part-time folks in and kind of build that relationship with them. Because sometimes it's challenging, right? They're not always here, and it's hard to get, the work done because they're here for their vacation. They don't want to do work. They want to hang out. So it's a good way to get that communication going. And it also gives you leverage because the Forest Service and the other land management organizations, agencies, will pay attention because they know you've done the work. You've taken the time to do the effort, and they'll listen to you more. Highly recommend that you attend a Map Your Neighborhood training through the Methow Ready group. Sandy in the back has the handouts that tell you the dates of the upcoming trainings. This is a great way to get together with your neighbors and talk about, what if this happens again? What are we going to do? And it has a really nice setup, a really set way so you can remember, just like first responders who drill and train and have a protocol, you as neighbors can do that and be ready. And when it does happen, you know what to do, because it's always hard when the crisis hits, right, to think straight. But if you've got that trained into your brain, it goes much better. Support the land agencies in doing good land management. There is really a groundswell now of people who work for these agencies and those of us who live next to these properties, to these lands. And the more we support them doing sustainable, thoughtful, ecologically correct their land, the more we're going to see that. This is a good example of the lost driveway project. This was money that the Forest Service sort of it showed up, and they knew exactly where to put it because the communities around Mazama had been saying, please, we've done the work. We've got 2 Firewise communities. We need you guys to do the work on your property that is on our boundary. And that's where they've prioritized the work. So that project is happening on public land adjacent to private land. So it's a really good, be that voice. People who show up are the ones who make the difference. Chillovist has always shown up at all of the county emergency management meetings, and that's how they've gotten grants to do projects there. Support your local fire district. This is my fire district, so District 6 got a shout out. This is my fire district. These are my neighbors. These are just, this is not a paid job for any of them. They just show up and they do it. And you don't have to fight fire to support them. You can help them write grants to get new equipment. You should see the stuff on the back of District 8. They've welded those poor water tanks so many times. I don't know how anything sticks anymore. Help them write grants if you're good at writing. Volunteer to be the person who puts together a phone tree so that when something happens, you can start calling your neighbors. But start talking with your fire district and see what you can do. You guys are lucky. District 6 has paid staff, it has a lot of good resources, but they still need you to be there for them. And I think, we have an opportunity to choose our smoke if we support prescribed fire. We're going to get smoke one way or another, right? We're going to have it from wildfire when it does this, and even Seattle has to pay attention because it wound up over there, right? Or we can put up with smaller amounts of smoke in reasonable, smallish time frames, smallish quantities to clear out some of the forest that needs that treatment. That's last year, yeah. So that's 2015. So get to know what prescribed fire is, learn more about it. We've got some great examples here in our own backyard in the Sinleheaton Wildlife Area over in the Okanogan Valley. Dale Swedberg, who's been championing prescribed fire for years and years. I have some great examples of that. If you do experience a fire, there's a lot of follow-on things that can happen. Flash flooding is the biggest one, right? But there's lots of other hazards post-fire. We have resources at the Conservation District to assist with that. And frankly, we've gotten an awful lot of practice in the last 2 years, unfortunately. So we do site visits to help landowners assess what likely risks are going to be, look at erosion potential, look at water quality, look at weeds, that kind of stuff. So if you do experience a fire, give us a call, have us come out and do a site visit with one of our conservation staff. Methow Conservancy also got quite a bit of experience from looking at Carlton properties too. Did you guys go out to this river at all? Yeah. So they're also a fantastic resource, obviously. So at this point, this is our contact information. I left in such a scramble to go to my workshop yesterday that I didn't bring any handout materials. So email me, call me, visit my website, okanogancd.org. We'll get you information. You can sign up for a risk assessment. And are there any questions for either one of us?
I have a handout back there about slots too.
Great. Well, thank you all.
I just wanted to jump up before you guys leave and say, if you do have questions, they will stay and happily talk to you. So, because I figure some of you are going to be jumping out here. So do come and ask your questions now if you want. And I just wanted to add that if you do want to sign up for a risk assessment, Sandy said that you can sign up on her sheet at Methow Ready, and she can get you the contact information. And a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight is at methowready.org, the cost share information, the risk assessment stuff. And if you haven't seen on the Methow Conservancy site, methowconservancy.org/fire, we put a lot of time and research with a lot of friends that know a lot of this stuff into creating a super detailed website on what you need to know pre-fire, during a fire, post-fire. So there's lots of stuff there too. It's a lot of the same information. Just want to give them both a round of applause. Thanks for